To lovers of the wild, these mountains are not 100 miles away. Their spiritual power and the goodness of the sky make them near as a circle of friends. They rise as a portion of hilled walls of the hollow. You cannot feel yourself out of doors. Plain, sky, and mountains radiate beauty which you feel. You bathe in these spirit beings, turning round and round as if warming at a campfire. Presently, you lose consciousness of your own separate existence. You blend with the landscape and become part and parcel of nature.
Before I get started, I want to apologize to my friend Sims. I feel pretty sure if I had asked him if he would like me to eulogize him, he would have said, no. And then he would have given me that big Cheshire cat grin of his and said, well, keep it short and sweet. I don't think I can do really either one of those things. Short and sweet was not exactly how I would describe my friend Sile. There's a couple people here that are absent. Sims's older sister Alice and her husband Ernest, Dr. Ernest Weinberg, couldn't be here with us. Ernie's fighting off a pretty serious infection. We all wish him well and a speedy recovery. But they were not able to travel here to be with us. But Ernie wrote me a note, and I'd like to read that. He said, "Dear Russell, how fitting that you should give the eulogy for Sims. Know that I am with you and that I feel much like you because we have lost a brother. Over the years, after marrying Alice, I developed a deep feeling of kinship for the three brothers I had gained. Among the memories are Thanksgiving football games we termed the toilet bowl. Teams were always Stan and me. Teams were always Art and Stan and Sims and I. I have no recollection of a victory in any of the events. I do remember refreshing beer and much fellowship. I also remember learning from Sims about the little snail garter fish and how much he wanted to help protect them in his work in eastern Tennessee. He astounded EA and Sims, the two sons, with a magic trick of smashing a salt shaker through a table, and I can see his clever smile for having performed it perfectly. There's much more, but I will leave that to you. Thanks for standing up." Sims had a life of family and friends before I ever met him. He had been doted on by big sisters, Alice and Ruth, followed around by little brother Artie and baby brother Stanley. He had friends he had known since kindergarten. Some of them are here with us today. He had played baseball in Herbert's Field with the Phelps brothers, Johnny and David, and a big kid named Ricky Shulman. Taking time out to teach baby brother Stanley how to kick a football, and if you've ever seen Stanley kick a football, he did a pretty good job. Stanley quelled the restless hearts of many an Alabama redneck while kicking the football. I think he saved us from another altercation or two by befriending people by playing football with them. Stanley was sitting with Sims the last days in the hospital. And he and Sims were talking, and I was sitting in the hospital room. We were all there. William was there. Brother Dave and Carolyn had been there. And Sims was there with us. At times you weren't sure how much he was there with us. But Stanley was telling a story about one of the first vehicles that Sims had bought, a pickup truck, I believe. And Stanley was talking about the pickup truck, and he said that Sims had gotten this pickup truck and only paid $100 for it. At that point, Sims' eyes wide open, and he said to Stanley, 105. He's still there. He's still there. Before I met Sims, he'd had a career job at IBM with his good childhood friend, Charlie Walker, considered this. Charlie and Sims had been recruited to IBM because they had obvious math smarts, but also because their brains could work in a way to suit becoming technology, computers. They traveled to Chicago and hung out in Chicago and learned everything IBM had to offer. Sims went away from IBM, but Charlie Walker stayed. There's another story I want to tell real quick. Charlie and Ted Walker. Sims was laying there. He wanted to tell a story about how one time he and Charlie, as little kids, were out back behind the garage, maybe smoking grapevine or smoking a cigarette they found. And big brother Ted got wise to it. Now Ted's a little bit older. The Sims has always described Ted. He was the consummate big brother. He was always ready to give you a red belly or grab you by the sideburns and give you the business, and certainly always ready to hang out to dry with the parents. Ms. Walker came back, as Sims said it, and she was wise. She smelled somebody had been smoking cigarettes or found a cigarette butt in the driveway. And she approached the three of them who had been standing there and said, somebody's been smoking. Sims and Charlie stood there knowing that Ted was going to hang it out. And he did. For the first time, the Sims could remember, Ted didn't take the opportunity to hang him out to dry. He saved him. And Sims never forgot about that. Before I met Sims, he'd been married to his first wife, Becky, and had two incredible girls, Ashley and Kristen. Seems like most of the trips that Sims and I took always involved going to see family and friends. We traveled twice to Denver on our trips out west to see Gary and Ashley. We went to Rochester, New York. Sims and I had gone to the Baseball Hall of Fame, and we went to Rochester to visit Christy and her family. We went to Seattle a couple times. I went with Artie. I went with Sims and Artie. We went back with William and David Phelps. Before I met Sims, he traveled out west to see Sam Rader. Only a few might know who Sam Rader was. Sam Rader was a park ranger, a forest ranger. He worked half the year in Glacier National Park, probably the summer, and he worked the other half of the year at the Everglades National Park. And Sims had visited him on a couple of occasions, and he always had stories about Sam Rader. Sam Rader died in a mountain climbing accident in Glacier years ago. Sims and William and David Phelps and I went out to Glacier, and we stood and looked at the mountain. Before I met Sims, he learned how to rebuild a Volkswagen bus engine on the side of the road, thanks to his dear good friend, David Harris, Brother Harris. They were truly kindred spirits. They shared a love for all things mechanical and just a little bit of tequila. See, I didn't meet Sims until 1976. He was standing in line with his brother Artie, who I had become friends with working at the Jolly Ox. Sims worked at the Jolly Ox, but he worked at the Jolly Ox in Rivergate, and he and I worked and played on the Jolly Ox softball team. We were there at the Green Hills movie theater to see King Kong. Not the Fay Ray King Kong, I'm not that one. The Kurt Russell, Jessica Lange King Kong. Sims met his second wife, Susan Edie, at the Jolly Ox at Riverdale, along with a beautiful bundle of joy named Joy. Joy and I haven't really ever spoke to this, but we actually kind of came to know Sims at the same time. Just about 1976. Speaking of visits, Sims and I went to Madrid because Joy was there. And we packed up Joy and we went to Morocco. And we toured around Morocco. And then brought Joy back to Madrid. Family and friends, what can I say? In 1976, Sims would load a Volkswagen bus full of us house apes, is what we endearingly called each other, and go to Key West and stayed in the southernmost campgrounds in the United States called Boyd's Campgrounds. And it rained the entire time we were there. Thus began a series of bus trips. The infield at Talladega, the infield and the outfield at Daytona and Bristol. And then in 1986, Brother Dave rebuilt a school bus from the Zion Baptist Church. We all chipped in a little bit of money, not near enough to cover it, and Brother Dave spent hundreds of hours rehabbing this thing. But in 1986, we loaded a big bus full of house apes, and we went to St. George's Island in Florida for Haley's Comet. Stanley, you were there. We saw more than Haley's Comet on that trip, I can assure you. The Daytona 500 party. How many in here? Raise your hands. How many in here went to a Daytona 500 party? Come on. Sims had so many great friends, and a lot of work friends came to the Daytona 500 party. Robbie Baker's here. Bob Sladen's here. Bob Sladen actually was responsible for what I thought was the highlight of the party, or one of the highlights of the party. One of the highlights of the party would be Rick Showman singing Submarine, Mama's Little Fat Baby. But the real highlight was Bob Sladen would bring an unregistered, unlicensed pyrotechnic device. It was a bomb. It was a loud bomb, but fortunately most of the neighbors came to the party. So I don't think, at least in my tenure, I don't think the police ever showed up at the Daytona 500 party. Maybe they should have. And also, the friends at work would always demand it when Sims got back from a trip that he give a slideshow. And so he would spend hours and days taking all the pictures that he had shot and made them into slides and create a presentation and show them to his friends at work. And I'm sure it was a reason that the friends at work would take off a few hours. But they enjoyed it enough to where it was a command performance, and it happened over the years as long as he was working for the State Department of Environment and Conservation, which he loved. In 1977, Brother Artie and I went to Colorado to find Sims, who was supposedly there somewhere. He had been sending letters back to his mom saying whereabout he hoped to be. We heard he was going to be in Boulder, Colorado on or about this day. So, Artie and I went. We had someone drive us from Portland, Oregon to Boulder, Colorado, and Artie walked into 7-Eleven and found Sims at the counter. We went on through Colorado, but I gotta tell you, a lot of people don't know this. We were staying in Boulder at a friend's house that taught mountain climbing for Holly Bar Sports. And he asked us if Artie Sims and I wanted to go with him the next morning because he was going to teach a class in mountain climbing. We went. So while he was teaching his students, Artie and Sims and I decided to, take our shot at it. And we got up on the face, the big rock that he was teaching people how to climb. And Sims was about 30 feet up the rock. I was a little around the side, and I heard, whoa! Sims had reached up and pulled out a really large boulder, and it had come loose, and it chased him down this rock. When he got to the bottom of the rock, hit him on the head, mangled his hand, and hit his knee. We loaded him in his bus and took him to the emergency room. And he spent about an hour in there and came out. And we said, well, we better, rest up and get ready to take you back home. And he said, no way. I didn't come all the way out here to have you guys take me home because I got a headache. So, we made a bed for him in the back of the Volkswagen bus, and we went on. On that trip, we would discover the canyonlands of Utah. It's a place we would keep going back to over the years. It's where the Colorado River joins up with the Green River. And it flows through a place called the Land of Standing Rocks, past Turk's Head, Cleopatra's Chair, and down through the maze. As Edward Abbey said, the maze is a hell of a place to lose a cow. It's a strange place. It's like Mars. It's a Martian landscape. Over the years, Sims and Artie and I would keep going back to the Utah desert. And each time we went a little bit further, a little bit deeper into the canyons. We started at the Green River Overlook, and me and my boy Point, and Grandview Point, that looks out on the chocolate drops, Cleopatra's Chair. And we wondered what else could be out there. In 1992, we four-wheeled over Elephant Hill into the Needles district. And there we camped with 3 guys from Switzerland. We didn't know the only other 3 human beings in that area at the same time happened to be camped right next to us. Sven, Svorg, and Ollie is what I called them because I didn't really know, I couldn't pronounce their real names. They were our exact age. And they were engineers, and they were out doing what we love to do, exploring the desert. And we became fast friends. We spent all of 4 hours together around a campfire in the middle of nowhere, but instantly became fast friends. On our 25th anniversary trip, which happened in 2002, do the math, we started at Panorama Point. And then we slowly crawled in our rented Ford Explorer. Can you believe that they will rent you a car to do what we did? We went down the Flint Trail. We went down to the Maze Overlook. And then we went past the chocolate drops, past Cleopatra's Chair, and down to the dollhouse. We hiked down the Spanish Bottom on the Colorado River, and we climbed out in a driving rainstorm, having to seek refuge in ledges because of the lightning and the severity of the storm. And when we got to the top and started to hike back to our campsite, we couldn't get there because it had been blocked by a flash flood. So we waited it out during the lightning storm underneath a juniper tree. We kept going back to the canyons, the 1977 bus trip, the 1992 trip to the Needles, the 1997 Ghost Town trip, or as Artie called it, the High and Dry tour. The 25th anniversary trip in 2002, and any other excuses we got, much to the chagrin sometimes of Amy. We kept going back. We always said that the reason we kept going back, because it was like going back to the well to replenish our spirits. There's a stillness that surrounds you out there. It's a kind of peace that comes over you as you sit in the shade of an arch and look out on a timeless landscape where the only sound is a breeze coming through the needles of pinyon pine. So much beauty, so much solitude, so quiet, so peaceful. We kept going back. I want to close with a poem I found on a rock, a plaque on a rock, while walking through Edwin Warner Park, part of Percy Warner and Edwin Warner Park here in Nashville. It had been closed to automobile traffic for maybe 46 years. And during the COVID time, I found myself wandering the different hills and valleys around, and I found myself in a part of Edwin Warner Park that I think the last time I was there, I was learning how to drive my father's 1960 board. I was sitting on his lap. That's how long ago it was. And I happened on this rock, and I stopped, and there was a poem by William Butler Yeats. It's a poem about finding that peaceful place. I will arise now, arise and go to Innisfree. And a small cabin I will build there of clay and wattles made. 9 bean rows will I have, and a hive for the honeybee. And I will live alone in that bee-loud glade. For I will have peace there. For peace comes dropping slow, dropping from the vales of morning to where the cricket sings. There midnight's all a glimmer, and noon is a purple glow, and evening is full of the linnet's wings. I will arise now and go to Innisfree, for always, night and day, I hear lake water lapping with low sounds by the shore. While I stand on the roadside or on the pavement grave, I feel it in the deep heart's core. When I saw Sims for the last time at a live hospice, I thanked him. I thanked him for all the great adventures. I thanked him for the great ride. What a great ride. Thank you. We'd like to open the floor up now for some remembrances. I know there's some people out here that have stories that they'd like to share about Sims. There's so many. There's just so many. You know, to me, it's not fair. It's not fair for you to lose a brother, an uncle, a grandfather, a friend. It's not fair. But we have a mountain of memories. And we can mine that mountain the rest of our days for a treasure that we can keep.
And I just wanted to say a few words about Sims. First of all, before I start my remembrances, I'd also like to just thank the people who have been taking care of Sims for the last, for many years, but in particular the last couple of years through the pandemic, which was hard as his health was failing and our world closed down. It really was, just gave us so much, it gave us so much comfort to know that there were people that were always looking out for him. And that is, of course, Ashley, who brought him to every doctor's appointment and masked up for many, many of a hospital stay and emergency. That's Meade and Venus, who both went to the house and cleaned and took care of him and spent hours talking to him and doing what needed to be done. That was fixing things around the house and making sure that he was comfortable, and of course Russell, who checked in on him, from what I hear, nearly every day. He brought in groceries, who just made sure that he was safe and cared for. Christy called him every day, never missed a phone call. We were both stuck in New York for a while, and it was hard. And there was a lot that went into his care towards the end of life. Of course, more than anything, Ashley, who's just been amazing. So I want to thank them all. Sims has been very special to me all my life. As I start, I just say it's hard to sum up a lifetime of knowing and loving Sims. Sims married my mom when I was 6 years old. He said he knew that we were a package, and he liked the package. And I felt that from the very beginning with him. So here are a few of my memories of Sims, and just some recollections of him and things that just say a little bit about who he is. To me, Sims was like a magical creature. He performed magic tricks that amazed me as a child. He once made me disappear from a box and show up in a suitcase in another room, which riveted a room full of 8-year-olds at the time. He loved magic. He told me stories of Houdini, which riveted me, and always made magic a special mystery in our lives. The races. There was a whole saga of races through my childhood. He taught me to love Daryl. I was a little Knoxville girl who wore a Daryl hat and cheered for him until I was hoarse. There was also Kayla Garber and some other folks, but Daryl was my guy. I sat on the top of VW buses in the infield, Talladega, Bristol. I drank Sprites while a coterie of friends whooped and hollered around me. And there were some mighty fine times. And Brother Dave was just telling me today that apparently there is an interview, which I do remember, of me at, was it Talladega, Brother Dave? Yeah. So we're going to have to see that tape sometime. I have a lot of fond memories of those adventures. And these are in no particular order. I was just trying to get some memories out there. But he loved kitties, all kitties. He had a soft spot for stray cats that often ended up in our home. His affinity for pathetic creatures carried on to the now infamous Woofster. Stanley hit in the head with the axe, which explained a lot, which Willie revealed to us much, much later.
It was the blood tip.
The blood tip of the axe, yes. He was a pathetic stray poodle that, for those of you that don't know, that was supposed to be a gift to me for my 15th birthday. And he, within about 3 hours, had started growling at me and only loved my mother. And was an absolutely miserable creature. But upon leaving later, he eventually settled for the one man living in the house in 1811 Wildwood, and finally would do porch sitting with Sims. And he loved the Woofster and had endless empathy for pathetic creatures, and he cried at his death. I remember camping with Sims, lots of camping, because of course we grew up in my time with him. Much of my childhood was in Knoxville. Being in the wilderness with Sims was like a magical kingdom for me as a child. He taught me never to take even a rock from the river, that nature was sacrosanct and must be respected and treated as sacred. He truly knew every bird and flower in the wilderness and saw each of them as nature's treasures. We awaited the arrival of the bluebells in Percy Warner as the most glorious declaration of spring's arrival, and we tried never to miss their appearance. We did a family picture in the Bluebells one year too. In Knoxville, we'd go to the AA games and we'd get big juicy pickles to last nearly the whole game. We went to the World's Fair and saw the Sun Sphere. We'd listen to records in our tiny little apartment, the married student housing, and he taught me about all the great bands of the 60s and 70s. To say that he cultivated a love of the Beatles in me would be an understatement. He was a scientist. He taught me, a sensitive young child, to think critically about the world. I remember his cutting his hand on a meat fork one time. And as I started to cry, scared because it was really quite gruesome, he told me to stop and to come over and take a look at it because it was really interesting to watch how the blood changed colors as it came out of your skin. And that there was nothing to be afraid of. He told me that you cannot panic in a panic situation, and I still think of that today. We made our way to Nashville when I was in 6th grade, and I grew up with all the friends in our upstairs and on our back porch. It was occupied by Russell, by David Phelps, by Ricky Shulman, oftentimes with a guitar and some singing, Willie, Art, and many others who loved some good back porch sitting. As you know, his Daytona parties were legendary. We all love W.C. Fields, and he taught me that there is a world full of mud turkeys and we all have to smoke them. He took me to Elliston Place and taught me to order the chocolate shake and to get there for roast beef on Thursdays. He taught me to play poker. We had family poker nights on Wednesdays where we would ante up with M&Ms. I don't think he let me win, but he might have. He taught me to drive a car and to love driving a car and a stick shift, of course. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't hear his voice in my head telling me to watch out for the idiot changing lanes without signaling. Of course, we loved to ride all forms of trains, little kid trains, big trains, look at model trains, and it goes without saying that there were many, many, many hours in our household where he was downstairs tinkering with those trains. And I love to hear his stories of his train rides. He loved to travel, and though I know in his final years he did not get enough of it, and I think it's significant that as his body started to change and become more limited in his mobility, he became more and more interested in reading about adventure stories, and of course not only just in the wilderness, but just anywhere. And I just kept thinking, like, his mind wanted to go, he still wanted to go, and I loved that. But as Russell mentioned, he did make some international visits to me. He came to Prague to see me when I lived there. We traveled to Budapest, where we walked on mountain hiking trails, watching the sunset, and ate big plates of goulash larger than our heads. We had a wonderful trip in Morocco, as we mentioned with Russell. Driving down in a car all the way down to Gibraltar, crossing over on a ferry, getting off in Tangiers, and just driving. We got shaken down by the Moroccan police, which was exciting. We ate all sorts of wonderful exotic foods and took, of course, hundreds and hundreds of photos, which is another thing that, of course, Sims loved to do, and to notice every detail. Everything that he saw in life, he noticed every little thing, which I love about him. Of course, his drive to Loveless were just a pretext for a country drive. So we loved to start out with a plate of country ham and biscuits. It was all about the drive. And so that was always a starting point for knowing every back road. In all of Tennessee, I just am always amazed at the endless paths and combinations that he could find. And he knew all the places to see the wildflowers, and he knew all the places to find the little meat and three. And every little hiking trail, it astounds me how much he knew about the hills, the towns of Tennessee. And those are some of my most cherished memories, are just those drives, talking, looking, just enjoying the Tennessee countryside. He was a collector of stories. I've never met a man with more interest. He told us stories about the battles of the Civil War, the origins of baseball teams, baseball fields, and all the crazy characters that came throughout the history of the sport. He tried to understand the story of the Beatles, reading book after book of the ups and downs of their fame. It's like he had a PhD in every subject that he was interested in. Every subject required a deep dive, and he was often most taken with the wild, the eccentric, the absurd, and of course those who took the road less traveled. I can't sum up my feelings for him, and I could go on with endless stories. I'm glad I don't have to sum up those feelings. I feel his influence in my life every day, and it's his kindness, deep, deep kindness, his empathy, his humor, and his devotion to me that have made me who I am. I will always be his little girl, and he'll always be my son's.
So I'm E.A. Weinmuller. Russell mentioned that my mother and my father weren't able to make it today. But also my wife Rochelle, our daughter Ava would love to have been here with my daughter Hannah as well. And my brother Sims and his wife Stacy and their children as well. So we're here on behalf of them. Now I have to read. So I'd like to start just by asking you all to close your eyes just for the next sentence that I'm going to read. My Uncle Sims always had a glint in his eye, and he would peer directly into yours to see who you are. So in my younger years, my glint was more manifested as kind of a Tasmanian devil. But even so, when I was ready, Uncle Sims was ready to meet me right there and to be present and to connect, to share family stories, and to share his energy on more focused terms. Our Grandma Rue had a pool out in the back, and there were always dozens of balls that were floating on the surface of it, all different shapes and sizes and colors. And one summer when we came to visit with Ashley and Christy and Joy and Artie, kind of organically, there was a competition that started. And it was to see who could take one of those balls, submerge them in the water, and put it between their feet and stand them as long as they could. So if you can picture 6 to 8 people flailing about in there, with one of them almost in a meditative state, right in the middle of it, not moving a muscle, just smiling about, that glint, very active. We actually termed him the champion ball stander after that. That was a term that went on for a long time. And it wasn't until the next summer that we realized that that pool was only about 6'6" deep. And if you remember the height of Uncle Sims,
He had that thing wedged on the bottom of the pool, and he loved, as Joy mentioned, the power of illusion. He loved it. He loved sharing that with everyone else and the magic tricks that he would do. We are all in love with that element of what he brought. The sleight of hand. As Russell mentioned, the salt shaker through the table. But the one that really stood out for me was the egg trick. And I don't think we can repeat it here today, but we probably could if we tried. So it kind of consisted of multiple chairs stacked up with on top of that, like upside down bowls and plates and saucers and cups. And on top of that, an egg. And on top of that, a dime. And at the bottom of all of it, there was a bowl of water. And the goal was to see if he could get the egg to land on top of the dime at the bottom of the bowl of water. It didn't seem like he ever missed the gaze with every single one of us when we were there. And we were covered in we were in our galoshes, we were in raincoats, we had tarps plated over all of us. And sure enough, somebody would take, Uncle Sims, would take I think it was like the end of a mop or something like that, and he would whack it, and everything would fly everywhere, and of course he'd do it right at us, and they were all plastic cups. And so we'd all just be screaming, and sure enough, you'd look at the bottom of it, and there was the egg sitting on top of the dime at the bottom of the water, unbroken. I've tried doing that since then. It did not work. And at that point, we all kind of looked in each other's eyes and we realized that we all had that glimmer too. As has been exhibited here and in Joy and Russell's accounts, Sims loved exploring the world. Tennessee, the American Southwest, the American Northwest. I never got to do any of those travels with him. But my experience with him was more where I got to witness him as an explorer of others who had that glint. He was searching for it. He wanted to share that with other people. And if you were fortunate enough to engage with him on this level, your glint would be brighter and so would his afterwards. So I'd like us all to just close our eyes again and envision Sims's kind and penetrating eyes. Let's go out and share that same glimmer with everyone else in our lives.
Hey, I'm Ashley, and the oldest and arguably pushiest of Sims's three daughters. I don't really have a story to tell, but I just have a thing I want to say. If I can, if I don't hyperventilate and pass out right here, which would be exciting, and he would appreciate that. My dad was sick for a few years, on and off, and then mostly on. But he never stopped wanting to live. He had so many interests, which people have talked about before. He was inherently curious about many things. Over the past few years, we went to countless doctor's appointments, and Daddy was at many varying levels of wellness over that time. And there were a handful of procedures and times when, he would say to me and we would say to each other, this could be it. But it wasn't. And every time he went on being curious about life as best he could, and in whatever circumstances he found himself, regardless of whether he could still hike those mountains or if he could just read about them. The point is, while he was alive, he never stopped living. And that for me, that's the lesson that he has taught me. And that's his legacy to me, is that he had a great respect for the natural processes of life, you know, and life, birth, death is one of those. Life, birth, death, you know, birth, life, death, over and over and over. And he felt himself to his core to be a part of those natural processes. So all I can do, and maybe this is a comfort to others too, is just to look at how much he felt himself a part of the natural world, and how he never stopped being curious, and he never stopped wanting to be here. He never stopped up until the end. He wanted to live, and we have the gift of life now. We do. And his legacy for me and for anyone who wants to take it is to live your life, is to do the things that mean the most to you, to love the people that you love, and to go the places you want to go, and see the things you want to see. Because that was his example to us. And that's it. And I hope somebody else is going to come up and tell an amusing story. We have to all cry right now.
I'm John. I have the privilege of being Ashley's husband.
Third.
Save the best for last. So I'm going to say something which is shocking, and that Sims could be a grumpus sometimes. But that grumpiness always came from the place of him living life on his own terms. And I just always respected it. When I joined the family, I was, of course, nervous. I mean, you all seek approval, right? But from the very first meeting with him, there was instant acceptance. I mean, there was just, that was over in a second. And I knew that I was okay with him, and he was okay with me. And that was just it was a relief. And when I started visiting, and we would sit up in the upstairs with the visitors that came by, the old friends, I saw something that was really amazing. A man who had maintained the web of connections throughout his life with people that he literally had gone to kindergarten with. And it's harder than you imagine, you know, but he did it. And it required effort. And obviously it was a team effort, but that's a really miraculous thing to have maintained that web. And the gift that gives, the lifetime of memories, with these shared folks and all the shared adventures and all that, I just was amazed and very impressed. This was a man who knew how to maintain that web. I missed all the earlier stuff in the adventures, but what I saw was the maturity and the full flowering of somebody who had lived life on their own terms and was still doing it. And all the grumpiness that he ever showed in the later times were just his way of saying, I'm still here. I'm still doing it my way. Even though it can be, you know, annoying at times. But I just had so much respect for that. It was an oddity in a really beautiful way. And I'll miss him. I'll miss that sense of calm that he generated. That sense of, I know myself, you know, which is also a really rare thing. And that sense of, I accept everything, you know. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. I love him. Loved him, and still do. Thank you.
Well, first of all, any photos up there of the statute of limitations? Anybody incriminated, don't worry about it. Plenty of time. Just look at y'all. I mean, this guy was lucky. Very lucky. I met Mike in 1980 in Knoxville, and about 2 weeks later met Sile. And then Stanley and Artie, and all of y'all, everybody. I know this room has been the event, and I cherish that. And yeah, I'm a lucky guy. But I could tell you a lot of stuff. But he's one of the smartest guys I've ever known. I don't know if he's intelligent, but he was smart. I mean, cars, beetles, baseball, wildflowers, boy, we went on many wildflower hunts. Smokies, House Mountain, all over Knoxville, the Cherokee woodlot. Had to relearn a lot of them every year, still do. Been trying to teach Russell about it for a year, at least his memory's still pretty bad. But yeah, we were nature boys and out discovering, and those walks in the woods and down the trail were special. And he meant a lot. What a lucky guy. I'll miss him a lot. And it's been an honor knowing all the Crownovers. And a boss is.
A lot of memories came back here in these words today. I'm Mike Swindoll. I knew Sims in grad school in Knoxville, Tennessee. I had an operation here on my thyroid, so my voice is kind of altered a bit, so it's not that I'm breaking up here too much. Things I remember back about period I met Sims when I first started grad school. And I hadn't thought about it until today, but I had a Volkswagen then, and that was probably one of an old Volkswagen. And all Volkswagens have need for work, and so the Crownovers were very handy friends for that period. We did a lot of Volkswagen stuff. I met Sims my first day of grad school. We sat down next to each other. In our class, we were partnered up to give our presentations together. We did a number of classes over the years in grad school. I got to go to Talladega. My one race, got to go with the family. Brother Dave, Sunday morning, hearing Daryl's name screamed out, top of the lungs. It was quite good memories. For some reason, right after grad school started there, I bought a camera. I think because somebody was showing slides all the time. And so I bought a 35 millimeter camera and took lots and lots of slides. And a lot of the slides were pretty big, like that one right there. And they're kind of washed out a bit because it was cheap film we bought back in those days. But took a lot of slides, and Sims would always show our slides to each other. And it was really important to him that I culled through my slides before we got here. We spent a lot of time with them. So we hung out. I guess I left Knoxville in '85 and went out in the world and never got back to Tennessee except for special occasions, some weddings, a few trips to Nashville. But Sims was an important person to me and probably most everybody here. His love for animals and odd things, I guess that it was natural that we had a good relationship together. Unfortunately, as I alluded to, I don't remember a lot of those days with Sims. A common activity we would do, and I don't know, we would on probably a school night, we would buy, each of us would buy a 6-pack of Schmidt beer. We'd get a 6-pack of Schmidt beer, and Willie and Sims and I maybe Susan might join us, or Nina, and go out to Stanley's house and play some pong. And I was never very good at it, but they were all willing to play with me. And pong's a game, ping pong played on a 4x8 sheet of plywood, and you hit it down on your side and it bounces the other side. Learned a great appreciation for many, many games of pong in my life. But I love Sims, and he very important that I got to spend those years with him. I'm very happy. So everyone in this room, other than my wife and William, I've met through Sims. So appreciate that. So that's it.
Bob Slayton, I may be responsible for, or at least participated in luring Sims back to Nashville to work at water pollution control and enforcement. And when I met Sims, Barry Sulkin had recommended Sims and said, you know, he's a really smart guy. I think he'd really be good to work with us. And you know, I immediately liked him and realized he was smart and wanted to work. And so, you know, that's how I got to know him. And then, you know, I think something somebody else said made me realize that, you know, when you get to know Sims, you kind of, you're invited into this large group of friends, you know, that's really fun. And so I so enjoyed getting to know many of you, you know, by my association with Sims. One story that popped in my mind, I probably shouldn't tell it. With Sims, I had been going to Road Atlanta because I was a sports car guy, and so I would go to the vintage races. Well, the vintage races are kind of gentleman races. Everybody's got an antique sports car they don't want to wreck, but they want to race. And Sims was like, well, that's a curious thing. You know, you're not going to race as hard as you can race. You're going to race hard enough to where you don't wreck your car. So he wanted to go see about this. So I didn't have any money, and I said, well, we'll just camp out, you know, down there. Well, he kind of probably pictured it something like a Daytona type race or something. But we went down, there was only 2 people camping out. Us and one other tent. And I was just down there to look at the cars, you know, mainly hang out in the pits and talk to the guys. I knew a guy that was racing. So we camped out that night. And about, you know, 8 o'clock or so, we were sitting there in the tent. The other tent was sitting there within earshot. You know, tents have thin walls. And so we started listening. There were like 3 couples over there. And they were, Sims was like, you wanna do some acid? I never had, and I didn't know what to think about it. And I said, well, how long does it last? He said, we'll be all right in the morning. I said, okay. Well, we did, and it was really fun. We laughed and laughed, and we listened to this other tent with these 3 couples in there have little fights, and I can't tell all those stories because they were really bawdy, but we were laughing at them, and we stayed up for hours and hours laughing at that tent, and oh my gosh, something else. And then the other one was, Sims could multiply large numbers in his head and give you the answer really fast. And I'm senile, and I can't remember the name of that restaurant down on 8th Avenue where the train track goes over down there. Yeah. Anyway, he gets up there to pay, and he spits out this big multiplication number to Arnold, and he said, and he spit out the answer back, and then he immediately gave Sims one, and Sims gave him the answer, and I went, dang it. So, I could go on, but anyway, I guess I so enjoyed just sitting on the back porch, chatting with him and hanging out, drinking a beer. And, you know, he just was, like everybody knows, just so full of great stories. And you know, I love when someone wants to listen to my stories, and I love to listen to his. So I'll just leave it at that.
Ed Walker, and I'm the big brother that saved him. We rode the same school bus. We were together in the same block all of us. And back in the mid-90s, Sims told me about his trip to Colorado. And he made it come alive. And I got so excited that I said, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to take notes. And he gave me about 15 things to do when I went out there. My wife and I went out for about 8 days. And we did every one of them. It's just perfect. And I decided I wanted to do it again. Another Sims trip is what I call it. So he said, well, I'm going to put you out in Colorado, the Grand Canyon, and you're going to go to Zion National Park and several spots and places that he had on the list. They were all just perfect, just like the first trip. And then I wanted another one. And he sent me up to Montana. So I've got to ride the boat rides and stay in the great lodges and ride the road to the sunshine, road to the sun, going to the sun road. And everything that he did on that trip was perfect. And I just think that Sims, there's a saying that all the money that you spend on travel makes you richer. And I think he was one of the wealthiest people I know.
My name is Vojnianic and I work with Sims. I work with Division of Water Pollution Control and still work for the state of Tennessee. And Sims said, when I was a young new employee that came on board, he was incredibly welcoming to me. And that was very soothing and a wonderful thing to feel until Joy told her story that he had love for all pathetic creatures. I'm revisiting that relationship. It is true that Sims, every year after his adventures, would come back, and during our annual retreat, he would give a beautiful slideshow where I don't know if it was the slides or the stories that were better. And we asked him after one of these shows, how do you manage to take all these beautiful pictures? And he said, well, it's really easy. You take between 500 and 1,000 slides, you choose 20, and you get a beautiful slide. Which made me wonder, did he ever get into digital photography? He did? Oh, that was probably wonderful. To 10,000. There were few people in my career that were a great influence, and Sims was one of them. And when we watch movies and we look at celebrities and they go through their motions, it makes you sometimes think, do they have to be a little bit like that in their real life? If they're some ugly Al Pacino role? Do they have to be mean? Do they have to be funny in everyday life? And we spend a third of our life in bed, 1/3 with families, or a little more, and then 1/3 at work. And just like I wonder about my 2 daughters, who are you? Are you brown-nosers when you're not around? I know you're with me. But I don't know who you are in the outside world. And I'm here, I just wanted to share that whatever kindness Sims brought to the family, he had enough of it and he shared it at work.
I'm Sims's second oldest granddaughter, second oldest grandchild. We have 4 sides. And I was helping take care of Grandpa Sims over the past year. And he came to know that I was learning to play the fiddle, which is something I got a lot of interest in while living in East Tennessee, something we shared a love for the mountains of East Tennessee. And he asked if I would play this at his funeral. And it was never a tune I had much interest in before, because it's sort of a tune that you play at a funeral. Which is what I told him. And he said, well, that should be fine then. Fair enough. Part of him, he likes this tune so much. I think there's a slight typo in the order of service. It's called the Shokin Farewell, not a Shokin. And
Sorry.
it's okay. And he has a recording of it he especially likes. That's from the Ken Burns Civil War documentary, and his former neighbor recording the guitar on that track. And it's a lovely recording. And I recommend everybody listen to it just in case you don't quite get the gist from my beginner rendition. But